Despite a deeply rich and storied history, a struggle has arisen for an important part of Japan's video game industry. Several factors are at play here. Not only did Sega, an industry pioneer, leave the market in 2021, but due to a changing climate around content consumption and a heightened fear of illness, arcades continue to shutter. In 2019, there were approximately 4,000 game centers operating in the country, down from over 26,000 at the industry peak of 1986. Around that time, Toshihiro Nagoshi would begin his career in Sega's second arcade development department, with a love of NASCAR and a passion for film, working across divisions and eventually heading the development of Daytona, USA. Nagoshi would soon find his way onto a title called Spike Out, a 3D beat-em-up releasing on arcade systems in 1998. Spike Out's gameplay involved the player facing off against many enemies at once, using a mixture of crowd control and single combat to emerge victorious as they navigate through the game's sprawling levels. Western companies such as Electronic Arts and Rockstar were developing and launching highly successful franchises such as Gran Turismo and Grand Theft Auto around that time. Sega's leadership aptly made the call to not make an effort at competing in the Western market, but instead turn their attention inwards to their own people. Nagoshi would kickstart the development of another title, this time adopting a more adult perspective than his previous titles such as Super Monkey Ball. The game was slated to be a crime drama, following the life of a young man living in Tokyo's red light district, pulled into a life of crime largely due to circumstances out of his control. A 3D beat-em-up much like Spike Out, the game would release in 2005 as Ryu ga Gotoku, known to the West as Yakuza. Fast forward nearly 20 years, and RGG Studio garners worldwide acclaim. Their latest title, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, boldly commits to a new direction set by its predecessor. The series, almost exclusively stacked with beat-em-up games since its inception, really bucked that trend in 2020, uprooting its identity and transforming itself into a turn-based RPG with Yakuza Like a Dragon. Infinite Wealth, being the second RPG in franchise history, marks a turning point. Fully commit to this new direction, or be left behind, much like the arcade and its business model being unable to adapt to a change in market conditions. Thankfully, Infinite Wealth not only respects series traditions, but actively strives to be bigger, better. RGG Studio carefully crafting an experience that rivals games like Yakuza 0. This is not just one of the studio's best games, but may very well be my favorite of the whole franchise. An adventure spanning not just Japan, but Hawaii as well, Infinite Wealth deeply and meaningfully iterates on new additions from its predecessor, whilst paying its dues to the franchise as it moves into the future. I'm James Jensen for Reset Button, and this is my review of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Infinite Wealth begins 3 years after the events of Yakuza Like a Dragon. With the dissolution of the Tojo clan and Omi alliance, Japan's leading Yakuza groups, abruptly thrusting thousands of unreformed criminals back into society. Ichiban Kasuga, one of the two playable characters, has a noble goal. Working at an employment agency with the sole purpose of rehabilitating as many ex-Yakuza as possible, leading them through proper channels in order to secure legitimate work opportunities. I know, a pretty mellow start following the events of series past, However, things very quickly go awry after leading Japanese VTuber, Tatara Channel, streams an expose on Kasuga, wrongfully accusing him of criminal activities in his endeavors and spoiling his reputation. Ichiban is cancelled. It's at this time that Kasuga is approached by Joe Sawashiro, captain of Kasuga's former Tojo clan family. Sawashiro informs Kasuga that his mother, missing since his birth, has made herself known to him from Hawaii and wishes to reunite with him despite never having met him. Suspicions aside, Kasuga decides to venture to Honolulu on his own and is subsequently drugged, arrested, and saved by none other than Kazuma Kiryu, long-standing series protagonist declared dead at the end of Yakuza 6, only to be revived and recruited by the Daidoji, a shadow organization of the Japanese government, using Kiryu's fighting prowess as a weapon in exchange for the safety of those he holds dearest. Sound complicated? That's because it is. But this level of setup is not exactly unusual for the series. What follows is a genuinely exciting story, full to the brim with melodrama, genuine stakes, and some truly touching character moments that tug at the heartstrings more so than any other game in the series. Look, it's no secret that I am a huge RGG fanboy. But the most difficult part of recommending these games to people is that they pull from a long, almost 2-decade history of storytelling and character development, and that can often make them difficult to pick up without what feels like a master's degree in Yakuza history. While it would be dishonest to say that that isn't the case here, I feel like this game can be enjoyed with just a reasonable grasp of the previous title, due to the nature of it being a soft reboot of sorts. While it may be difficult to grapple with some of the more important aspects of Kiryu's character and his motivations, you'll definitely still generally understand what's going on here. Without going too deep into anything, the series is known and loved for its dramatic lack of tonal continuity and these insane winding plot lines. And for me at least, Infinite Wealth's narrative is not just a strong point for the game, but may very well be one of the best in the series, playing with and improving on the dual protagonist structure established in Yakuza 0. It's got a lot to say, and despite its incredibly complex and twisting plot that definitely goes a bit haywire towards its conclusion, it never loses sight of its biggest strength, its characters. Both Kasuga and Kiryu are compelling heroes in their own right, but if you're familiar with the series, you'll know that Kiryu is quite the storied individual, with regrets, trauma, and a legacy both in and out of the Yakuza. There's also the fact that he's supposed to be dead, something touched upon in the last game, but truly grappling with its consequences here, as he struggles to conceal his identity under oath to the Daidoji, whilst unraveling a sinister plot stretching across the Pacific. RGG Studio has openly discussed the transition away from Kiryu as the primary protagonist of the series, and passing the proverbial torch to Kasuga. One of the most impressive aspects of Infinite Wealth is its ability and commitment to adequately farewell one of gaming's most iconic characters, whilst honouring their legacy and truly understanding what made them as compelling as they are. Through not just the main story, but also some exclusively crafted side content for Kiryu, Infinite Wealth gives him much needed closure on events past, as he's previously been in somewhat of a state of limbo since that ending in Yakuza 6. These issues are approached with careful consideration, understanding that facing one's past can be a painful thing, and really works to unpack the impact that this character has had in the past 20 years, not just for the characters he's affected, but the audience as well. Kiryu eventually learns to not just accept his current situation, but is able to take adequate steps towards atonement for the life that he's lived. And I found this journey that he embarks on throughout the course of the game to be genuinely moving and really showcases the talent on display from RGG's writers. Not only is it able to weave its sometimes ridiculous melodrama into something genuinely inspiring, but it also manages to incorporate that aforementioned lack of tonal continuity into something actually surprising, with certain moments of this narrative leaving me with a huge smile on my face.
別にそんなんでへそ曲げるわけじゃねえがよ。
だから聞いてましたって。誰だ？次の曲だぞ。
どういうわけだろうな。次の曲も俺だ。
いや、絶対わざとでしょ。
レールから外れた。
KAZOKU is also compelling in his own right, clearly distinguishing himself from Kiryu despite some parallels in their backstories. His past is somewhat of a mystery to him, and as the narrative unfolds, he's able to confront aspects of his life that he was previously unable to contend with due to his upbringing. Seeing this character not only face these challenges head on, but genuinely grow into a natural leader is as compelling as it sounds, and serves as an excellent companion piece to Kiryu's story, really cementing the themes the writing is attempting to put forth as the series moves into the future. It's not just KAZOKU and Kiryu that have compelling stories to tell, however, and practically every side character echoes the themes of this narrative. Everyone has something weighing on them, something they must confront either due to their actions or the actions of others around them. And these ideas of atonement and acceptance are sprinkled all across their storylines. Granted, the newer side characters are given somewhat of a spotlight, but this is to be expected as returning companions have already been fleshed out. If I had one complaint about the story, it's that one of the villains' plot lines falls a bit flat by the game's conclusion, and they definitely feel a bit like a generic supervillain, lacking some believable motivations. The conclusion of this character's plot is not entirely wasted, as it's used to shine a light on other characters and their passions, but seems strange to me as the other villains are typically quite well developed and even quite sympathetic at times, something RGG typically excels at. The pacing of this adventure is also surprisingly well executed, considering its massive scope and plethora of side activities. It cleverly strikes a balance by incorporating these moments of extreme urgency, while realistically allowing you to explore the world at your own leisure, and giving you the space to take in all of the side content the game has to offer. It's just really well done. Chef's kiss. Most notably, love child of series director Ryosuke Hori and, well, karaoke, the karaoke minigame makes a comeback. For those unaware, since Yakuza 3, these games have always featured playable karaoke sequences, with some incorporating them into the main plot. Here, you can watch grizzled criminals showcase their soft sides, singing sweet tunes that would feel right at home on the J-pop charts. Speaking to Gene Park of the Washington Post, Hori stated that he felt that, quote, video game music should get the same kind of care and attention as any chart-topping hit, end quote. And that passion for the craft here is really on display. As the internet knows, these songs are pretty good, and some new additions really add to the experience. Not just that, but there are also some incredibly fleshed out, game-spanning activities that are so in-depth that I'm hesitant to call them minigames. Enemies retain their Sujimon nomenclature from the last game, but this time around they can be collected by giving them Suji gifts and forced to do battle against other Sujimon trainers, with certain Sujimon being resistant or weak to certain types of damage. A Pokemon Snap-inspired minigame, Sicko Snap, tasks Kasuga with collecting photos of men dressed in some very questionable outfits, exposing themselves to the public whilst riding a trolley through the streets of Honolulu, sending said photos to the authorities. As thrilled as Nintendo's lawyers would have been about those last two offerings, maybe the Star Edition is post-pandemic PTSD-inducing Animal Crossing New Horizons-esque resort management simulator, say that 10 times fast, Dondoko Island, where Kasuga is tasked with restoring an island resort to its former glory after being ravaged by illegal dumping. You'll clear trash from the island with the eventual goal of inviting tourists to visit. You can build and place furniture and buildings, go fishing, collect bugs, and eventually put your Sujimon to work in a slave camp to farm resources for you. When it was first revealed about 25 hours into the game, I honestly believed that this would be like a short detour from the main quest, but it quickly sprawls out into what can be tens of hours of content, allowing you to visit other people's resorts, fighting off trash dumping pirates, and generally making your island look pretty. There are a plethora of smaller minigames on offer as well. Can Quest makes a return from the previous game, as well as giving you the ability to effectively roleplay as the coolest Uber Eats delivery person on the planet. Crazy Taxi-inspired Crazy Delivery allows you to deliver food to the people of Honolulu in the most stylish manner possible. There are batting cages, driving ranges, underground gambling dens, and fully functional arcades equipped with claw machines, Sega bass fishing, and for the first time in an RGG title, a fully playable Spike-Out arcade cabinet. Drink links make a return, allowing you to have a heart-to-heart with your companions over a classy beverage, giving more context to their motivations in a way that is separate from the main plot, adding weight to those incredible character moments they can have during the story. The most important part of this side content, though, would have to be the sub-stories. If you know anything about RGG, you'll already know that these smaller stories can tend to be a little bit out there, but honestly are the foundation for how these protagonists are characterized, putting a spotlight on who they actually are as people when confronted with more mundane situations. Despite their initial wacky presentation, these stories always round out with this wholesome attitude. I'll give you an example. When first arriving at one of Honolulu's major locations, a big industrial mall, you spot a pram falling down one of the escalators as a mother cries out for help. Being the reasonable human being that you are, you chase the pram as it finds its way outside, dodging and weaving through traffic as this baby rockets forward. On successful retrieval of the pram, you find out that not everything is as it seems, and there is no baby, but a full-grown, nappy-clad man that Kasuga knows from Japan, who conveniently falls asleep when his nappy-wearing lackeys show up, provoking a huge misunderstanding. A fight ensues, and as he wakes up, you and the now placated group notice an elderly man buying shaved ice from a food truck and promptly throwing it into the air above his head. After questioning the curious behavior, you learn that his wife is dying and her last wish is to see the snow again, a difficult task in Hawaii of all places. And out of the corner of your eye, you see a glisten, as the powdered lining of the nappies has mixed with the melting shaved ice. And everyone has the same idea. I understand that I sound like a 10-year-old here, but I can't think of any other way to describe a series of events this strange. I won't spoil anything, but it really shows these wholesome underpinnings giving these situations a lot of heart. The game is full of content just like this. All I've talked about is just scratching the surface of what is on offer here, and more so than any other game in the series, almost all of it is worth engaging with. Now for the meat and potatoes: combat and the game's RPG systems. A major sticking point for many people when approaching turn-based RPGs is the flow of combat. Around Game Awards season last year, I remember seeing countless comments on TikTok completely writing off incredible games like Baldur's Gate 3, with fantastic commentary such as turn-based combat skull emoji. All jokes aside, I do genuinely understand the feeling some people might have when it comes to engaging with a combat model like this, especially when they're more familiar with action-focused games. But like its predecessor, Infinite Wealth takes that slower combat model and morphs it into something much more tactile through smart use of character positioning, QTE prompts, and flashy framing of the action. Characters, especially KIRYU, feel incredibly distinct, his base moveset incorporating fighting styles from previous games, allowing you to switch between Brawler for high base damage, Rush to attack twice in one turn, or Beast Mode for massive AoE damage at the cost of mobility. There are also some incredibly cool abilities unlocked late game as well that I won't spoil, but I'll say they definitely fit his identity in the series perfectly. Combat really has this flair to it, which is somewhat uncommon in games like this. RGG has committed to this identity, not just through goofy enemy design and abilities, but also its more grounded depiction of fights as opposed to something in a fantasy setting. This flair is most present in the way that characters use their abilities, almost always using excellent framing to highlight the action. It also really intelligently utilizes QTE prompts when using abilities for some extra damage, and is balanced in a way that doesn't punish you for failing, but adds a nice little bonus for skillful play. This does a lot in making combat feel more engaging, as you can seldom just select your attack and sit back and let the animation play out. When enemies attack as well, you can time a button input when the attack hits for a perfect guard, blocking a portion of the damage. This can be a game changer in some later boss encounters, where certain strong attacks can easily see your party wiped if you aren't careful. The style is also showcased in characters' ultimate abilities, which can be used in combat at the high cost of MP. Every character and class has at least 2 of these available, and often will be their strongest attacks, with an accompanying cutscene that is almost always hilarious. Each character can also perform a flashy tag team attack, where they can team up with the party leader to perform an extra powerful move that fits their character at the cost of a very slowly recharging meter. Returning from the previous game are the summons, called Houndmates, where KAZOKU can dial a very questionable phone hotline, and at the cost of some cash can call in support. These characters include some choice individuals from some sub-stories, such as the Baby Man from earlier, as well as a great selection of casts from earlier games, which will be sure to please series fans. These Poundmates range from being pretty effective in combat to downright overpowered, often with the capability of one-shotting every enemy on screen at the balance of a high price tag. Taking your enemies to Pound Town has never been so easy. Jesus. Who wrote this again? Who wrote this? Enemy design is also really great, if a little obscene at times. With the game's more realistic setting, you'll be fighting actual people instead of goblins and ghouls, and to make sure there's a good amount of variety, KAZOKU will hallucinate whenever you're in combat, turning the typical drunkards and musclemen into something a little more sinister. Hackers, clowns, glow stick wielding anime fans, and weird perverts. There's absolutely no shortage of variety here, each providing a distinct challenge as you shift your strategy to take them out. Fights also feel considerably more strategic this time around, without being overly complex due to some very smart visual language. You're now free to move around the arena in a small circle, allowing you to position yourself relative to your foes, your teammates, or nearby objects that you can pick up and use as makeshift weapons. I think the thing that Infinite Wealth's combat system succeeds at most is its ability to incentivize the use of the basic attack, and not just using it as a fallback when you lack MP for abilities. There's legitimate utility on offer here, allowing you to knock enemies into walls, into each other, or even into teammates for a nice combo. Status effects, debuffs, and stat boosts are also increasingly impactful as the game progresses, really requiring you to build your party appropriately in order to succeed. Infinite Wealth focuses heavily on its RPG and buildcraft, offering an intricate and game-spanning gear game bolstered by the ability to change the class of any character at will. Each companion has one class unique to them, being Adachi's detective job or Tomizawa's cabbie title, and this runs the risk of feeling like the correct way to play, with every character having a distinct damage or supporting role. However, apart from some very specific limitations, any character can have their class changed to one of 10 others, each with fundamentally different playstyles, equipment, and abilities. Take the Action Star for example, turning what could be a glass cannon mage into Uma Thurman. There are many more of these to pick and choose, from the squid cannon wielding Aquanaut to the support superstar Idol. All of these feel meaningfully distinct and really give you the ability to put together a team that fits your needs rather than a preset list of characters. As you experiment with these different classes and level up your characters, eventually you can take specific skills from any class, allowing you to buttress weaknesses in each character's kit and build a class more specific to your desired playstyle, nicely giving you more agency as the player. Further increasing that level of build diversity is the game's gear system. While most armor simply gives stat increases until some specific late game kit, every class has a multitude of weapons available to them, all with meaningful differences and damage types. Each weapon can also be upgraded, meaning that if you really like a specific piece of gear, you can bring it with you to the end game. That's not to say the endgame weapons aren't worth crafting. A great example is the Chef's ultimate weapon, greatly increasing the damage of skills at the cost of much higher MP usage, genuinely changing the playstyle of this class as you're required to more intelligently manage your resources as a trade-off for vastly increased power. These ultimate weapons can only be crafted using a combination of items found throughout the world, bought from vendors and dropped by enemies. This system is expertly tuned, and I was only able to afford this high-end gear when I actually needed it. While the game does remove some of the more obtuse, grindy elements from its predecessor, it still does an excellent job of incentivizing you to explore the map, which I think is a good segue into talking about the game's level design and presentation. If you're ever in Tokyo, take a walk through KUKYOU after playing any RGG game, and I promise you, you'll have no problem finding your way around. Seriously, I know there are memes about people driving around LA after playing GTA 5, but Kamurocho is seriously so similar to its real-life counterpart that I got deja vu when I visited last year. RGG games have always subscribed to a very specific design philosophy, just like you, should subscribe to the channel. Shameless plug, I know. In all seriousness, this philosophy has been to build smaller and more intimate spaces than typical open world games, but pack them full to the brim with activities and meaningful encounters. There is no space for the sake of space here. Everything about Infinite Wealth's maps is so well realized, they genuinely have a sense of place that properly evokes the real life locations they're inspired by. People often mention this idea of virtual tourism, and everything from the soundscapes to the visual presentation absolutely nails this feeling, not just for the Japanese locations, but for Honolulu as well. The studio's done a great job of making these two regions feel meaningfully different from one another, with Hawaii notably feeling more grungy and tourist focused than Yokohama. Whilst being more open and spread out, the way you contend with this space feels meaningfully different. There are more roads, beaches, food trucks, parks, some of these seldom seen in previous games. Its presentation is really on point, with a surprising level of detail indoors and out, really grounding you within these areas. If I'm honest, there's a lot to say about this game. It's effectively making an effort to wrap up a storyline spanning 2 decades while setting itself up for the series' future. It needs to contend with the legacy of not just the franchise, but one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. This is no small task. I'm absolutely delighted to say that the game excels on this front, meaningfully giving KIRYU the send-off that he deserves, whilst allowing the torch to be passed to a character that has enough charisma and heart to lead the series for just as long. While the plot may contort and twist, it never loses sight of its strong thematic core, its character moments, and that tonal dissonance that the series is known for. Some villains may not be as compelling as others, but with some of the most interesting and heart-wrenching side stories in franchise history, the writing here is truly A-level. Absolutely packed to the brim with optional side content. There's a lot on offer here for both completionists and casual players alike. Containing what is effectively a fully fledged Animal Crossing clone, minigames galore, and 2 multi-story dungeons, when talking about value, it's hard to say that Infinite Wealth doesn't bring a lot to the table. Combat is deep and strategic, supported by an excellently tuned RPG and gear game, allowing for meaningful class and build diversity, giving you the ability to truly commit to your own playstyle, and with fantastically hilarious enemy design and flashy presentation to boot. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth puts its feet forward, boldly committing to a new direction for the series, whilst understanding and honouring the legacy that led it here in the first place. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Bit of a long one this time, but it is what it is. If you're wondering where I've been, well, I went to LA for the Game Awards, and that was great. I met some fantastic people. And then when I got back to Australia, I got COVID, and then I've been sick for like 3 months. Not great, but, seem to be on the mend, maybe, hopefully. In any case, if you like the video, maybe subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment. Always love those. Thank you so much again. Love you and leave you. See ya.